Episode 6. As the night enveloped Olympus City, coloring the ruins with deep shadows, Ren's crow vision activated instinctively. Further along their path, through the increasing darkness, he perceived movements and silhouettes that immediately signaled danger. "Cesar, Leo, wait," Ren whispered, stopping abruptly and pointing ahead. "I see figures. They don't look friendly." 3 of them, moving through the shadows. Cautiously, the 3 advanced in silence, utilizing the cover of the ruined buildings. As they got closer, the faint moonlight revealed their adversaries. Cesar narrowed his eyes, his face hardening as he recognized them. "The Hounds," he muttered in a somber tone. "A tracking group from the Moon faction. As their name suggests, they are capable of hunting anyone they are ordered to." Just then, a quick silent movement from behind forced Cesar to spin on his heels, narrowly dodging a stealth attack. The Hounds had become aware of their presence. Cesar adopted a combat stance, his body tense and ready for action. The intense red aura manifested around him again, radiating heat and power, a visual warning to his attackers. But facing him, the 3 Hounds moved with chilling confidence. The first, with an agile physique and light movements, moved with predatory grace, ready to pounce with lethal speed. The second adopted a more static posture, his hands tense around rock fragments that seemed to levitate around him, ready to be shot as high-velocity projectiles. The third, with martial calm, wielded a pair of tonfa that began to vibrate subtly, the air around him rippling slightly, indicating he was imbuing his weapons with the power of wind. Ren and Leo, crouching behind a partially collapsed wall, prepared to jump to Cesar's aid. The situation seemed dangerous, even for someone as powerful as him. However, before they could move, Cesar shot them a quick glance over his shoulder, accompanied by a slight shake of his head. The message was clear: "I don't need help. Stay out of the way." The confidence in his eyes, despite the threat he faced, stopped the young men in their hiding place. They would have to trust Cesar's ability to handle this difficult situation. Cesar's first action was as fast as it was imposing. With a fluid movement of his hands, he conjured a wall of fire that surged from the ground, encircling the 3 Hounds. The flames danced with scorching heat, blocking any attempt at escape and protecting Ren and Leo from a possible surprise attack. The Hounds, unfazed by the fire barrier, attacked in coordination. The first launched a barrage of rock projectiles, aiming precisely at vital points on Cesar's body. With rapid, precise movements of his hands, Cesar disintegrated the rocks in the air, reducing them to dust before they could reach him. The second Hound, the agile one, lunged at Cesar with surprising speed, brandishing a knife with the intent to find the slightest lapse in his opponent's defense. He managed to slash a part of Cesar's suit near the shoulder, grazing his skin. The small wound unleashed a palpable fury in Cesar. His eyes, previously intense, now glowed with an even brighter fire, reflecting his rising anger. With a guttural roar, he conjured a devastating area attack. "Ignite execution!" Cesar shouted. An enormous fireball formed over his head, pulsing with blinding heat. He hurled it at his attackers with a sweep of his arm. The impact was bright and powerful, shaking the ground. 2 of the Hounds suffered superficial burns and were thrown backward by the shockwave. However, the last Hound took the full impact, becoming severely wounded and knocked out of the fight. Only one. Cesar exclaimed, his breath ragged. "I thought they would be easier." Changing tactics, the fire surrounding him condensed in his hand, taking the form of an incandescent red flaming sword. "Ignita," he said, grasping his creation with determination. The 2 remaining Hounds, despite their injuries, lunged into the attack. Cesar, with his fire sword, faced them in a deadly dance. Every strike from Ignita left trails of fire in the air, while the Hounds' attacks, though fierce, struggled to overcome Cesar's blazing defense. The battle intensified, each combatant fighting with a clear intent to eliminate their opponent. Ren and Leo watched from their hiding place, tense and ready to intervene if the situation became desperate for Cesar, even though the signal they received indicated otherwise. In the heat of the battle, the 2 Hounds began to wear Cesar down, but he continued attacking, driven by his relentless nature. However, the excessive use of the firewall, the constant employment of his aura defense, and his attacks began to deplete Cesar's strength. He decided then to prepare another powerful attack to quickly end the fight. With a movement of his hands and uttering its name, Phoenix Wings, he attacked with all his might. 2 strong waves of fire, shaped like wings, flew toward the Hounds. The attack left the two Hounds on the verge of collapse, but Cesar had exhausted his strength and fell to his knees. Alarmed by the situation, Ren jumped out without hesitation to protect Cesar with his bare strength ability. He ran and leaped to position himself between Cesar and the Hounds. He immediately punched the ground to rip out a piece of concrete to use as a shield, while Leo used his power to create a barrier of trees separating Cesar from the Hounds. Cesar, breathing heavily and his body aching, glared at Ren and Leo. "What in the hell do you think you're doing? I told you to stay back. Now both of you are in danger because of me." His voice, though weak, was charged with frustration and worry. However, Ren, with adrenaline pumping through his veins and the image of Cesar falling etched in his mind, paid no attention to the reprimand. His eyes were fixed on the Hounds, determination etched on his face. He snapped an oxidized pipe from the ground with a sharp blow, improvising a crude but forceful weapon. Now with a shield and an improvised weapon, he was ready for combat. Cesar tried to get up, supporting himself on his hands, but a groan of pain escaped his lips. His strength had completely abandoned him. At that instant, the remaining Hound, with a wind-imbued strike, cut through the tree barrier created by Leo, splintering the wood. A cruel smile spread across his face as he saw the newcomers. More prey has arrived. What a feast awaits us tonight. With surprising agility, activating the ability he copied years ago, Ren moved with the speed and grace of a feline. He darted from his position, the pipe in his hands, and struck the wounded Hound who was still staggering, taking him by surprise. The impact knocked him down, leaving him immobile. "Now we'll see who the prey is," Ren growled, his voice tense but full of resolve, as he turned to face the last remaining Hound, ready for confrontation. Leo, his eyes full of worry for Cesar, prepared to use his powers again, ready to defend his new companions. The battle, far from over, had taken a new and dangerous turn. Just in the instant before the clash between Ren and the last Hound, a violent crunching sound shook the door of a nearby building. A body in the Hound's uniform shot out of the opening, its flesh almost completely incinerated, smoking and falling inert to the ground. Behind him, a woman emerged, radiating incandescent fury. Her face was contorted with rage, and her eyes shone with a blazing intensity. "Useless," she hissed with a rough voice laden with frustration. "I couldn't get anything out of him. No resistance for a simple questionnaire." Her furious gaze then landed on the scene outside. Detecting the remaining Hound's uniform, her expression hardened even further. "You're another one of those who's been harassing me, aren't you?" she spat, her voice dripping venom. In an instant, her hands rose, and the air around her began to vibrate with heat. Small bursts of fire materialized, taking the shape of sharp scarlet knives. Without hesitation, she launched an attack against the Hound. "Scarlet attack," she screamed, and in the blink of an eye, the rain of fire knives shot out at dizzying speed, relentlessly seeking their target. The Hound had no time to react. The small incandescent projectiles impacted his body again and again, piercing his armor and igniting his flesh. A choked scream of pain mingled with the crackling flames. In a matter of seconds, the Hound was completely incinerated, falling to the ground like a smoking charcoal statue. The woman stood there, breathing heavily, her body trembling slightly from the newly released fury. The air around her smelled of burning and ozone. Ren and Leo watched her in shock, the sudden and brutal display of power leaving them breathless. Cesar, still on his knees, looked at her with a mixture of surprise and recognition. It seemed the person they were looking for had found them, in the most explosive way possible. The woman, with her fury beginning to dissipate and replaced by an expression of surprise at seeing the others, focused her gaze on Cesar, who was still struggling to stand. Her face softened slightly, although the intensity in her eyes persisted. Well, if it isn't my dear little brother," said Sophia, her voice now calmer, but with a slightly teasing and affectionate tone at the same time. Ren and Leo looked at each other, completely baffled and stunned by this new revelation. The powerful and terrifying Lady of Fire is Cesar's sister? Cesar, leaning on the improvised pipe as a cane, finally managed to stand up with difficulty. "You never lose the habit of calling me that, sister," he replied with a snort, though a small smile touched his lips despite the pain. Then, with a gesture towards Ren and Leo, he introduced them. "Sophia, these are Ren and Leo. Guys, this is my sister Sophia, also known as the Lady of Fire." Ren and Leo remained silent for a moment, their minds trying to process the information. The image of the woman effortlessly incinerating a hound was still fresh in their minds, contrasting sharply with the idea that she was the sister of their taciturn and sometimes impatient companion. All was reflected on their faces. Cesar's recruitment mission had turned out to be much more personal and unexpected than they could have ever imagined. The Lady of Fire, a feared legend in the underworld, was family to one of the Aurora's cardinals. Ren, Leo, and Cesar followed Sophia inside a building. As they walked, the quartet observed the vestiges of a recent battle. The place was covered in ash and the ground was burned. Amidst all the chaos, the four sat down, and Cesar said, "You were having fun before we arrived," in a sarcastic and amused tone. Sophia smiled widely, as if the chaos and destruction around her were just proof of her strength and power. Cesar, his voice still somewhat weak from the exertion, asked, "Why are the hounds following you, sister?" Sophia shrugged with a sardonic smile. "The Moon faction has always wanted me to join them. It seems the word no is not in their vocabulary. I just wanted to find out where their hideout is to pay them a warm visit," she added, with a dangerous glint in her eyes. Then, she turned her attention to Ren and Leo. "All right, and what are these two little buddies doing with you?" "We've started a new guild called the Aurora," Cesar explained, with a hint of pride in his voice. "And they are our first rookies." "Ah yes, I heard something about that," Sophia commented thoughtfully. "That's why I've come to ask if you're willing to join the guild as our administrative chief," Cesar asked, revealing his true intention. Ren and Leo looked at each other, surprised to realize that Sophia was the person Cesar had been seeking all along. Sophia replied with a disdainful tone, "I'm not interested." But before Cesar could insist, Ren intervened enthusiastically. "We would really like you to join, Ms. Sophia. With all the power you have, you could help us train a lot." Leo nodded fervently, sharing the same idea. Cesar added, reinforcing the young men's argument. "Besides, you're a very intelligent person, Sophia. You know how to classify the types of missions and all the other administrative things the guild needs. You would be a great help to the Aurora." Sophia let out a bitter laugh. "That was a long time ago, silly little brother. The people in that guild didn't know how to keep me entertained, that's why I left. Damn them at the dawn. They accepted me for my power, but they couldn't handle a little heat in their lives, ha." Her gaze darkened when mentioning the dawn, making it clear she still held a grudge against them. Sophia crossed her arms over her chest, observing the scorched room with a thoughtful expression. "I'm not interested in taking guild missions. It's not my pleasure to have to hold back from reducing everything to ashes. It requires too much moderation." Cesar tried to persuade her. "But you wouldn't be doing missions, Sophia. You would be in charge of distributing missions, classifying them by difficulty level, and of course, training the recruits. Your experience would be invaluable." "I see," Sophia replied, her gaze now fixed on Ren and Leo, assessing them with a penetrating intensity. "But first, I want to know if these two little buddies have what it takes to be my students." Cesar frowned. "What kind of test will you put them through? You don't need to take them as disciples," he asked, worried about what his sister might have in mind. Sophia continued to stare at Ren, Cesar, and Leo, and her playful smile did not fade. "I have an idea," she said with a tone of voice full of excitement. "A test, to see what they are capable of." Cesar, who just moments ago had shown a proud and relaxed attitude, changed his expression. Worry took hold of him, and his voice, previously full of confidence, became calm and pleading. "Sister, please don't seriously hurt them," he said. "They are our first recruits." The four exited the building. The setting for Sophia's test was not inside a building, but an exterior area full of debris. The tension in the air was palpable. Ren and Leo didn't know what to expect, while Cesar remained alert, his eyes fixed on Sophia. Sophia smiled with a mischievous spark in her eyes, though there was a hint of seriousness in her tone. "You just have to hit me once. If you succeed, you pass the test." Ren and Leo exchanged surprised glances at the peculiar test. Hitting the Lady of Fire seemed an almost impossible task, given the demonstration of power they had witnessed. However, youthful confidence and the desire to prove their worth prompted them to accept the challenge. They stood side by side in front of Sophia, who watched them with an amused smile. "Whenever you're ready, little buddies. Don't hold back too much, or this will be boring." Ren and Leo, aware of their inexperience in aura combat, knew the power difference was abysmal. They decided to rely on their abilities and surprise to try and overcome the test.